I left my autistic son alone in public, and something followed him home. The chipped paint on the window frame vibrated with the bass from a passing truck, rattling the loose glass like skeletal teeth. Ben didn't flinch. He sat cross-legged on the living room floor, his gaze locked on the static of the old television set. He'd been like this for an hour, ever since we'd gotten back from Miller's grocery. Miller's. Just the thought made my stomach churn. I should have known better. I did know better. Ben is particular. That's the polite way of putting it. He's 10, but his world exists within a tightly defined set of parameters. Change is his enemy. Routine is his life raft. Autism. It's a word, a label, but it doesn't even begin to encompass the reality of our existence. That day had been particularly brutal. A meltdown at school over the texture of the new lunch lady's mashed potatoes. A screaming fit in the car because I'd taken a slightly different route home. My head was pounding, my nerves frayed. We needed milk. I hate that we needed milk. Miller's is just outside of town. One of those small, dusty places where everyone knows everyone. It's familiar. It's predictable. Or, at least, it was. I told Ben to stay by the magazine rack. Just for 5 minutes, honey. I need to run next door to grab my prescription. Stay right here. I'll be right back. 5 minutes. That's all it took. When I came back, he was still there, standing rigid, his blue eyes wide and unfocused. He wasn't looking at the magazines. He was staring at the far corner of the store, near the dusty shelves of canned goods, a place no one ever goes. Ben? I said, kneeling down. What are you looking at? He didn't respond. I touched his arm and he flinched, a low, guttural sound escaping his throat. It wasn't a sound I recognized. Let's go home, sweetie. I coaxed him, gently pulling him away. He resisted, his body stiff and unyielding. I practically had to drag him out of the store. He hadn't spoken a word since. Now, glued to the static on the TV, he was completely unresponsive. I called Dr. Carter, Ben's pediatrician. It sounds like a sensory overload, Sarah, she said, her voice calm and reassuring. Try to keep him calm. Stick to his routine. If it persists, bring him in. Easy for her to say. That night was the first nightmare. Not Ben's, mine. I dreamed I was back in Miller's. The store was different, though. Dimly lit, the shelves impossibly tall, stretching into the darkness. And the air was thick with a smell like rotting leaves and wet earth. I was searching for Ben, calling his name, but only silence answered. Then I saw it. In that same corner he'd been staring at. A shape. A dark, amorphous mass that seemed to writhe and pulse in the shadows. It had no face, no discernible features, but I knew it was watching me. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it wanted Ben. I woke up gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the old refrigerator. I crept into Ben's room. He was asleep, his face pale and peaceful in the moonlight. I stood there for a long time, just watching him breathe, trying to shake off the lingering fear of the dream. The next day, the scratching started. It came from the walls, a faint, rhythmic scratching sound, like fingernails on wood. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. I tried to convince myself it was just the old house settling, the wind rattling the siding, but it grew louder, more insistent, and it always seemed to be coming from the corner of Ben's room, the same corner he'd been fixated on at Miller's. Ben started drawing. He'd always enjoyed drawing, simple pictures of trains and trucks, things he was familiar with. But now, his drawings were different, darker, distorted. Strange symbols began to appear, circles with lines bisecting them, jagged shapes that looked like teeth. He drew them over and over again, filling page after page with the unsettling imagery. I showed the drawings to Dr. Carter. She frowned. These are unusual, Sarah. It could be a manifestation of anxiety, a way for him to process what he's feeling. But I'm concerned about the self-harming behavior. Ben had started biting his hands, leaving angry red marks on his skin. He wouldn't stop. He'd just stare blankly ahead, his eyes vacant, and gnaw at his flesh. Mark, Ben's father, showed up. Or rather, he was summoned. I hadn't spoken to him in months. Not really. He couldn't handle Ben. He never could. "What the hell is going on, Sarah?" he demanded, his voice laced with accusation. "He looks like a zombie. Are you even taking care of him?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him about the nightmares, the scratching, the drawing sense of dread that was consuming me. But I couldn't. He wouldn't understand. He'd just blame me, like he always did. "He's just stressed," I mumbled, avoiding his gaze. "Stressed? He's autistic, Sarah. That's your excuse for everything. Maybe he needs medication. Maybe he needs..." He trailed off, unable to articulate what he thought Ben needed. He stayed for an hour, long enough to make me feel even more inadequate, then left, promising to look into getting Ben some real help. That night, the scratching intensified. It was relentless, a constant, maddening presence that echoed through the house. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the scratching, listening to Ben's shallow breaths, and wondering if I was losing my mind. Desperate, I started researching. I spent hours online poring over articles about autism, about anxiety, about everything. And then I stumbled upon it. Local folklore, old wives' tales, legends of a malevolent entity that preyed on the vulnerable, on children who were different, who existed on the fringes of reality. An entity that could attach itself to a person, feeding off their fear and anxiety, slowly twisting them from the inside out. The legends spoke of symbols, of rituals, of ways to banish the entity. But they were vague, fragmented, filled with archaic language and cryptic warnings. I felt a surge of hope, quickly followed by a wave of despair. Was I really considering this? Was I so desperate that I was turning to folklore and superstition? Then I looked at Ben, at his vacant eyes, at the self-inflicted wounds on his hands, and I knew I would try anything. Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor, had always been a bit odd. She'd lived in the town her whole life, knew all the old stories, the forgotten histories. She also had an unsettling fascination with Ben. She'd always stop to talk to him, even though he never responded, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that made me uneasy. I decided to talk to her. What did I have to lose? She listened patiently as I recounted the strange occurrences, the nightmares, the scratching, the drawings. Her expression remained impassive, but I could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Recognition, understanding. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "The old ones," she whispered, her voice raspy. "They never truly leave. They linger, waiting for an opening." She told me about the entity, about its hunger for innocence, about its ability to manipulate reality. She spoke of symbols, of rituals, of the need to protect Ben. She gave me a small, worn book filled with hand-drawn symbols and faded text. "This was my grandmother's," she said. "She used it to protect her children. It might help you." The book was terrifying. The symbols were unsettling, the rituals complex and demanding. But I was desperate. I started performing the rituals, chanting the ancient words, drawing the symbols on the walls of the house. I felt foolish, ridiculous, but I couldn't stop. The scratching grew louder. The nightmares intensified. Ben's behavior became more erratic. One night, I woke up to find him gone. His bed was empty. The window was open. A cold wind blew through the room, carrying the scent of wet earth and rotting leaves. I ran outside, screaming his name. The woods behind the house were dark and silent. The only sound was the rustling of the leaves in the wind. I grabbed a flashlight and plunged into the woods. I stumbled through the trees, calling Ben's name, my voice hoarse with fear. Then I saw him. He was standing in a small clearing, bathed in the pale moonlight. He was facing away from me, his back rigid. And standing beside him, in the shadows, was something. I couldn't make out its form, but I could feel its presence, a cold, malevolent energy that radiated outwards, suffocating the air. "Ben," I screamed, running towards him. The entity turned. For the first time, I saw it clearly. It was tall and gaunt, its body shrouded in shadows. It had no face, only a swirling vortex of darkness where its features should have been. It reached out towards Ben, its hand long and skeletal. I didn't think. I just reacted. I remembered the ritual, the words, the symbols. I drew a circle in the dirt with my finger, reciting the ancient incantation. The air crackled with energy. The entity recoiled, hissing like a wounded animal. It turned its attention to me, its faceless gaze piercing my soul. I felt a surge of terror, so intense that I thought I would faint. But I stood my ground. I continued chanting, my voice growing stronger, more confident. The symbols in the dirt began to glow with an eerie light. The entity writhed and twisted, its form flickering in and out of existence. Then, with a final, ear-splitting shriek, it vanished. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. Ben was still standing there, staring blankly ahead. I rushed to him, wrapping my arms around him. "Ben, are you okay? Are you hurt?" He didn't respond. He just stood there, stiff and unresponsive. I led him back to the house, my heart pounding with fear. The scratching stopped. The nightmare ceased. Ben's behavior improved. He started drawing trains and trucks again. He even smiled occasionally. Detective Miller, called by a concerned Mrs. Henderson after hearing my screams in the woods, investigated. He found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no evidence of anything amiss. He looked at me with pity, his eyes filled with skepticism. "Maybe you should see someone, Sarah," he said gently. "This town can get to people, especially single parents." I nodded numbly. Life returned to normal. Or, at least, as normal as it could be. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Ben was. Different. Subtly, almost imperceptibly different. He was quieter, more withdrawn. He spent hours staring out the window, his eyes fixed on something unseen. And then I found the drawing. It was hidden under his mattress. A new symbol. One that wasn't in Mrs. Henderson's book. A symbol that looked like a twisted, inverted version of the one I had used to banish the entity. I stared at the drawing, my blood running cold. Ben walked into the room. He looked at me, his eyes dark and unfathomable. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. He reached out and touched my hand. "It's still here, Mommy," he whispered, his voice raspy and unfamiliar. "It's inside me now."